into all that's around you. The chair, the room, the atmosphere, the substance of the plants, the substance of creation, and go into the feeling of the oneness. Feel everything. Start to develop your awareness of the energy that exists between you and nature. Nature by itself is not the creator, it is part of the creation. So you can't find it in nature, but you can become aware of the sensation that exists when you move into the oneness. The vibration, the interface between you and everything else. And this is easy on a physical level. It's actually very simple on an individual level to feel the oneness from a physical standpoint. It's a little bit harder for the mind because the mind doesn't resolve itself into the oneness. The mind feels separate. It doesn't have the same ability as the form to feel. So the mind thinks about things like oneness, thinks about things like God, thinks about things like all the things that the mind thinks about. Trying to work out how it can get a better situation, resolve itself into maybe a better life, maybe a better pattern somehow. But mind creates chaos. All of mankind's mind creates chaos and war and conflict. Because everything the mind comes up with is basically a substitute for the reality of the truth. The mind is actually like a drop of water in the ocean of consciousness. Trying to keep a drop of water separate from the ocean is pointless. Because all the water returns to the ocean upon death. The mind can't keep itself separate for very long. It tries everything in its power to maintain itself in a form of a droplet of water, thinking itself to be perhaps larger than it is. But the mind in that sense is not really separate. It's just very, very small. Very, very limited by what it can perceive. There's a much more limitless state of consciousness available. The ocean of consciousness, the ocean of the divine mind, the access to information from the divine mind sense. But the mind tries to give itself all sorts of reasons not to join with the universal mind, with the divine mind of the Creator. It comes up with things like maybe trying to tune into aliens or some sort of consciousness out there. Maybe it's channeling something. All excuses, all substitute patterns, trying to work something out other than just joining with the oneness. And people come out with all sorts of crazy notions, meant to impress other minds, other little droplets of water. But usually some people's droplets of water, they find that amusing, find that entertaining, and so they participate in that. But joining with the ocean of water, the ocean of divine consciousness, there is no amusement in the droplets. There is no amusement in some sort of channeling of consciousness. All the silly mind games that go on in that regard. We ultimately don't have to channel anything. We just have to let go into the universality of God, the Creator. But people try to do that by joining up with something, maybe an organization, So there are certain organizations that have been highly successful at getting members because they can promote something that keeps the little droplets feeling like they're separate and can retain the sense of separation of droplets of water. People love their own identities. They love their own identities so much that they die trying to keep their own identities. And they suffer through all sorts of things. And in that, the mechanisms of control of religions have preyed upon them, preyed upon people, preyed upon people's fears primarily. And to allow somebody else to be the intermediary between you and God, or between the sense of self and divinity, is attempt to stay as a droplet of water, an attempt to shuck off the responsibility to somebody else. But that's an impossible task. Nobody else can take you or anybody else to the ocean. You have to join with that yourself. You have to choose, if that's what your choice is, to let go into the ocean of consciousness of the Creator. Although there are religions that will gladly take your money, there are all sorts of them out there that would gladly take your money and amuse you to whatever extent in some sort of superstitious belief patterns, all to keep the sense of self going, the sense of the droplet of water somehow having some meaning. But the droplets of water of consciousness have no meaning, separate from the oneness of the whole, the ocean of consciousness. So droplets of water are the typical state of consciousness, the ego and the id. All the meditation, all the prayer to try to get some sort of alignment or get something happening with the droplet of water consciousness, all pointless. The only thing that the mind can do is to let go and merge into the ocean of consciousness. Love to be the part of the oneness, and in that find the oneness yourself. And the truth of the oneness already is. So that sense of aloneness gives you and anybody, and it gave me and it gives everybody the same opportunity to come into the truth of the oneness, the all oneness. Aloneness is an illusion. It's all one. Look around, feel what's around you, it's all one. To whatever extent we even hear someone else's voice, hear or sense or participate in something else, where we feel like there's something else going on outside ourselves. It's all messages from the senses, the body, the mind, the heart, the eyes, the hearing. Because there is only one consciousness, the consciousness of the Creator, the consciousness of the oneness. All of the senses that are given to the little droplets of water are like tiny little fractals of awareness. But that tiny little droplet of water not only feels separate, it feels alone. And that's where the heart comes in. The mind can't do anything about what the heart wants. It tries to convince the heart of all sorts of things. It tries to convince the heart that the heart's not worthy to be part of the oneness. Maybe trying to accuse the heart of not being so holy or sacred or pure in some way that is the reason why the heart doesn't join with the oneness. very popular in the world for well-meaning people to think they're all sinners. It's all the mind trying to convince the heart, trying to stay in the sense of a droplet of water. But the heart has to break free of that pattern. It has to take the initiative to break free from the thought pattern. Because the thought pattern doesn't lead to anything other than the state of a sense of separation, being a little droplet. And really that's about the size of consciousness, tiny little droplet. All caught up in its own droplet idea and awareness and self. Meanwhile, there's something so much greater going on. There's an ocean going on, but the droplet feels so separate. Tiny little drops of consciousness, looking out and thinking that there are other tiny little drops of consciousness. Looking for some sort of meaning of life in being a drop of consciousness. There is no meaning in the drop except the fact that the drop can return to the oneness, to the ocean of consciousness. But the heart has to want this. The heart has to choose to merge into the oneness. No longer being deceived by the mind of separation. Anytime the mind starts to think of separation, starts to try to speak to the heart about separation, don't you believe it. Don't fall for it. You are always part of the oneness, as is everybody. Can't get away from it, in fact. No matter how many ideas there are of separation, none of it is the truth. There is no separation. It's all one. The whole of the universe is one. All of the galaxies, all of life here on Earth. And you are one with the Creator already from the moment your consciousness even had a sense of separation. It was still one. It just thought of itself as being a drop somehow. People feel so small in this. Of course, a droplet of water is relatively small compared to the ocean of the truth of oneness. So that little droplet has to get burned away. The sense of separation has to be transmuted and changed. So things happen. That droplet